Hey guys, it's the plant doctor here. What I want to go over today is how to plant a Japanese maple. I'm going to plant several Japanese maples in this bed here. I've already got one behind me here. I'm slowly but surely going to put in some evergreen and deciduous height in this bed because the neighborhood behind me here is starting to get filled in with houses. When I moved in, there were no houses. Now there's a lot of houses, and it's only a matter of time before I want to screen somebody off here. So this will be part of the screen, even though it is a deciduous tree. So planting a Japanese maple or planting any tree in general, the first thing we've got to do is if there's mulch on the ground, let's push that mulch back, and we want to dig our hole roughly twice the diameter of our root ball in the container. So for example, if I've got a 12-inch root ball, I want like a 24-inch circle, okay? And then the depth, you want the depth not quite as tall as your pot, and we'll talk about that more here in a minute. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and dig this hole. I'm gonna hit the fast forward button here, and I'm gonna have this hole dug for you here in about 10 seconds. So let's get it done. Now that we have our hole dug, I want to double check my depth, and I'm going to show you a trick that I learned years ago. You can actually use your shovel handle as a tape measure. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my shovel, point it upside down, and I'm going to find a mark. If you had a pen or a pencil, you could actually mark it on your shovel handle, but I've got a little nick that's already in my shovel handle here that shows me the depth of the top of my pot. Now I can take that, I can stick it down in my hole right here, and I can see that I'm pretty good. I want the root ball, the top of my root ball, to be maybe 2 inches or 3 inches higher than the surrounding terrain. I'm actually planting the Japanese maple a little bit high in the ground. They do not like to have excessively wet feet. So when you dig your hole, dig it about twice as wide as your pot, and then depth-wise, plant it a little shallow. Now that we have our hole dug the correct width and depth, what I want to do is remove my Japanese maple in the pot. What you do not want to do is just grab the tree and pull it straight out of the pot. It would just be like if you were to take an individual and pull them straight up by the neck. You're going to pull those roots away from the vegetative part of the plant, and you run the risk of killing your tree, which these are not cheap. They're very expensive if you go to a garden center and buy one. So make sure that the correct way to do this is this. I want you to lean your pot over on the side, give it a few good hits, and I don't know if this is completely rooted to this pot or not. I potted this tree up about 2 years ago in this pot. I actually grafted this tree on my own. I'll try to leave a link to the video to that, how to graft Japanese maples. But once you've hit it a few times, loosen up that root ball, then start to work it out sideways. Like so. Take your hand, put it on the bottom of the root ball. And then lay it in your hole. So we've got some straightening up to do here, but I just want to double check. I'm going to grab my shovel right here. You can use your shovel as a gauge to see where you're at in terms of your root ball height relative to the natural terrain of the ground. And you probably can't see it here on the camera, my dirt pile's here in front of me, but we're about 2 or 3 inches high. That's perfect. That's exactly where we want it. The next thing that we want to do is to begin to backfill our hole. In my area, I have very sandy soils. There's no need for me to amend my soil here. I've got like 80 to 90% sand is my texture, and the rest of it's silt. There's very little clay. If you live in an area that has heavy clay, here again, I do not need to do this for my soil. I'm gonna do it for demonstration. Get you some pine bark amendment, and I'll try to leave a link to some down in the description below. So if you wanted some mailed directly to you from Amazon, you could get it. All right, and then what you want to do is just incorporate that into a homogeneous mixture with your backfill. So if you have heavy clay soils, what that's going to do is limit a couple things. It's going to limit compaction, and it's going to limit the amount of moisture that's held in your hole. So remember, we don't want water to be sitting on these roots. We want to keep them moist, yes, but to have saturated soils for prolonged periods of time here is not a good thing. All right, so let's go ahead and begin to backfill our tree. And once I get about, I don't know, halfway around, I'm going to look at it from a couple of different angles. I can tell that my tree's leaning this way a little bit, so what I want to do is pull the bottom of my root ball up and put some dirt in on this side. Pack it in. You can use your foot or your hand or your shovel, it doesn't really matter. It's looking pretty good from this way. I'm still leaning back this way a little bit. So what I can do is grab my tree on this side, give it a little wiggle, push some dirt in there. That's starting to look pretty good. So let's complete the backfill process. As you're completing your backfill process, you don't want any big chunky dirt. So here again, see, I've got sandy soils, it just crumbles, but if you're in clay, you'll get a lot of chunks. So what you want to do is take your shovel and just chop those chunks up before you backfill. All right, that's looking pretty good. One thing I want you to notice here, and I'll get some close-up of this as well. Notice that I did not take a lot of my native soil and pile it on top of my root ball. Reason being, we want gas exchange between the atmosphere and the roots. Yes, there's some things happening there where if we were to put 2 or 3 inches of soil on this, we could literally suffocate the plant. Also, if you are buying a grafted Japanese maple, so if your Japanese maple is a named cultivar, like this is Tusaka Silhouette, you could have Garnet, you could have Bloodgood, they are grafted. Look at your bark and you'll be able to see where the tree is grafted. So the lower part's the rootstock, the upper part's the scion, and you'll see a graft scar. It'll be pretty obvious. You'll see a change in color or texture on the bark. Never, ever, ever put soil up against your graft union. Also, when I go back to put my pine straw back, or if you're putting pine bark mulch or rock or whatever you're using for your mulch, never put that around that graft union either. Okay, so that is a sure sign that you could kill your tree. What am I going to do with it now that it's in the ground? I'm probably going to play with it just a smidge more off of camera just to get it perfect straight up and down. And then once I do that, I'll probably do another YouTube video here for this, how to stake and guy a tree. This tree is pretty limber here. I get a ton of wind where I'm at. I'm at a higher elevation compared to the surroundings around me. So I'll probably stake and guy this tree through the first year. In terms of watering, I'm going to soak this tree as soon as I backfill, or excuse me, as soon as I move my mulch back over my backfill. It's going to do two things for me. Yes, the tree needs water, but also there's probably little air pockets in between the native soil and the backfill and the root ball of the plant. When you water, that soil is going to fill in those air pockets, so there might be little low spots when I'm done watering, and I can go back in and put a little more backfill in those low spots. In terms of watering day to day, I'm going to water this about twice a week. I'll probably soak it on like a Monday and come back on a Thursday or a Friday and soak it again. You want to saturate it, but you're not watering this every day. Twice a week's more than enough. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I'll do my best to answer those questions you have about planting your Japanese maple. As always, thank you for the likes. Thank you for hitting the sub button if you haven't already. And until next time, happy gardening.